Thank you, everybody. It's great to see your faces. Even if we are long distance here, I know that we'd much rather be all sitting in the same room having this conversation, but this is the way things go at this point. So we're going to make the best of it. And the most important reason we wanted to get this started, which hopefully will turn into even a monthly series, is to find some way to connect with all of you. You are very special people. You're the reason we exist, certainly as an orchestra. To have an audience out there is the most important thing for us. So with the thought that we're probably going to go into being a series of these kinds of chats, I just wanted to say that we're starting with Amelia. We're very happy to have Amelia Hollander-Ames with us as our co-principal violist. I'd like to start by asking you, Amelia, that assuming that you began your music training at an early age, I'm assuming that's correct, was there a moment in your life then when you realized that music was in fact what you wanted to do?
Yeah, it was fairly late considering how early I started playing. I started when I was 5 on violin, and it was always something that I would practice the bare minimum to keep getting to go to music camp. It was really all about the social, the friends part of it. And it was only in high school when I went to Meadowmount, which is, people call it a practice jail. It's a music camp where there's a mandatory minimum of 5 hours of practicing per day. And it was my second summer playing viola, so it was just a really, really deep dive into my new instrument. And I think I went thinking, there's no way I'm gonna like this. It'll be a real test for me to see. And then I not only loved it, I practiced way more than the 5 hours a day, just really went deeply into it, and went again for another summer. So I really feel like those 2 summers there were part of what made me realize this is what I want to do.
Right. Talk a little bit more about Meadowmount. Most people who are not musicians don't know that name. Where is it? How many people are there? Who goes there, etc.?
I don't know how many people are there. It's in the Adirondacks. It's picture any 80s summer camp movie with just very bare bones accoutrement, like ping pong tables, and just that was kind of the extent of what was given to us for our entertainment. And it was really in the rough, and yet the teachers who are there, it's very well known for having been that kind of place for for generations of particularly string players and pianists as well, but it's really mostly a strings camp. And one of the stories, so there's a lot of sneaking out that goes on because we're so repressed and need to get out. And we would sneak out to go to the truck stop. So it's a famous place there. And we would also sneak out to climb the mountain. And when you climb the mountain, you see all these names that have been carved in the rock up there. And one of the things that everybody does is look for Itzy and Pinky, meaning Itzhak Perlman and Pinchas Zuckerman, who are two of the very famous alums who went there. Yo-Yo Ma went there too, and Jamie Laredo. And it was only after we had climbed it several times and were looking for their names that we realized that Itzhak Perlman was probably not climbing the mountain in the middle of the night, the way everybody was, considering he had childhood polio. But it was just one of those things that it's like, oh, right, we're scouring the rocks. But it's the kind of thing where everybody's practicing, so you're not tempted by, it's not like you're in your room hearing music, or games outside. Everybody's just in it together. And yeah, it was an amazing couple of summers.
So you had started out on violin and then transferred to viola?
Yep.
What caused that to happen?
Okay, which story So I went to a music school in New York City called 3rd Street Music School. It's in the East Village, and it's a very small, very family, feels very, very special community. It's not like, it kind of stands apart from the Upper West Side musical institutions in New York. And I started there on violin. I stayed there all the way through high school, and what happened in 8th grade is I had a really big crush on a violist. And it was such a small orchestra, I figured, well, if I play that instrument, I might get to sit next to him. So pretty much it was...
How long did that last?
The crush lasted a while. Of course, once I sat next to him, I couldn't speak. That was the problem. But we're friends now. I told him that story years later, and he was like, what? It's like, I can't talk to you. But, you know, you never know what's going to bring you to the instrument that suits you best.
Right. I know that settlement school. I conducted a couple of concerts there with a new music ensemble that the composer Barbara Kolb had put together. It was a performance series called Music New to New York, and did a couple of different concerts. It's not with orchestra certainly, but with smaller ensembles.
Oh, wow.
And of course, all new music. So I don't remember those performances, but I do remember the great Jewish delis that are really close by.
Yes, 2nd Avenue Deli.
That was deli heaven, I tell you. It was just fantastic.
So Bruce, can I just interject that Indian Hill Music had a relationship with 3rd Street?
That's
because
right.
after 9/11, we raised money and instruments for that school.
Right.
Back in 2001.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's right. So Amelia, all of us here know you as an orchestral player, but I know that your career includes so much else. Tell us a little about the different ways that you're involved as a musician.
Well, my favorite thing is chamber music. That's probably a predictable thing for violists to say.
Never say that to a conductor.
Oh, sorry. Well, I feel like orchestra playing can be very chamber music-like, you know.
There you go. Right answer. got out of that one. So string quartets have always been my main thing. Right after school, I went to NEC, New England Conservatory in Boston. I got a job in Tel Aviv playing with the Israel Contemporary String Quartet, so I spent some years there. And now I have a quartet here in Boston called the Kraft Ensemble. And actually, I was just looking through my planner, and we were supposed to play a box lunch at Indian Hill just, I don't know, a couple weeks ago. It was still in my planner. That was sad to see that there, but I know we'll be back in June of next year. And I also, it's not so much a part of my life anymore, but I did do a lot of work in the contemporary improvisation department at New England Conservatory. So that's always been a love of mine, as well as playing improvised music and writing and collaborating. So on a classical instrument like this, how do you even start improvising? What's the process you go through?
You have to be, how do I put this? You have to be comfortable being a baby again. You know, like when we get so, you know, the 1,000 hours thing, or 10,000 hours, we get so adept at doing this one thing very well. And whether it's playing piano or reading, you know, scores or playing my viola, and it's really hard to not be good at something. And I think that's hard for a lot of classical players with improvising, is that it's a little scary. So there's definitely a lot of beginner mind, kind of of just letting go of expecting it to sound the same way it's going to sound when you play Mozart or Shostakovich or any of the music that you're working on. And I was fortunate at NEC that the contemporary improvisation department gave me 2 teachers every semester to take lessons with. So that was really, the private lessons with people who really have mastered improvisation was incredible. Like to just to just know your fingerboard, you know, so much of it is like the reason John Coltrane practiced 18 hours a day was to just know his instrument inside and out, to just be able to minimize the distance between thought and sound. And that's what I think is the goal with improvisation. And it's hard. It's very hard to do when you're so used to reading music. I don't know
Exactly.
if I'm
So when you're doing improvisation, you don't have a book that you can open up and gives you a chance to practice how you do this. It blows my mind. Of course, as a conductor, you don't do very much in the way of improvisation. Not that the players would appreciate anyway. So when you're doing this, it just how you talk about connecting the mind to the fingerboard that you're playing on. Can you expand on that anymore? I mean, it boggles my mind how you do that.
I don't think I'm very good at it yet. It's been years and years, but I don't devote the lion's share of my musical practice to that. But when I do, I have my viola here. We don't have frets, so it's just this expanse of black, right? There's no marking. So I think in particular for string instruments, that's one of the things about improvising that can be very scary. And just kind of finding, well, a lot of jazz playing is about the chords. So a lot of the practice is drilling all the inversions of seventh chords and ninth chords and all the kinds of harmonies that come from that world. And I will say one of the really amazing lessons I got from Henke Snetsky, who's a great klezmer player, saxophonist, and clarinet player, was that those chords that we think of as being jazz chords, and then when you come into one of those ear training classes as a classical player, feels very intimidating when you're having to take dictation, and it just feels really scary. He was like, these are the same chords as are in Mahler and in Shostakovich and in, and kind of like, you've played these chords a lot. You just didn't realize they were these chords. So to kind of connect it with that 20th century tradition was really helpful for me.
That's great. That's great. It still boggles my mind. All I need is a score to open up and stick the wave in the air, and I'm set for life. So let's talk repertoire just a little bit. We know you playing an orchestra where you don't get a choice to play what you might really want to. You have your own quartet where you can pretty much choose programming. And certainly as a solo recitalist, you're definitely in charge of all of your programming. What then makes for a really interesting program that you would put together? What are the kind of important elements that you would do in the course of a 2-hour concert?
Wow, I would ask you the exact same thing.
I have some thoughts about it.
Let's see. Well, there has to be a personal connection and to the music itself. So I think when you're in school, there's a certain amount of repertoire building. You want to play the Brahms sonatas, you want to play the Schubert, and just kind of building that repertoire that that is the canon. But then at this point, I think there's a need to approach those with a way that's very fresh, and then also to make sure that there are voices that are being heard that might not have been heard before. So I definitely feel like I don't even know if duty is the right word, but I have a lot of friends who are composers, and so I know how hard it is to make a living that way. That boggles my mind. To make a living writing notes on paper and then expect they will be created or interpreted by performers. So I do feel like as much as possible, I try to play music by people I know. And I think that back in the day, there was this feeling like, oh, new music is very intimidating and thorny and atonal or dissonant. But the fact is that most of the composers I know today don't want to alienate audiences. They want to bring people in too. So there's a lot of really beautiful tonal or not tonal, but I think accessible music being written. And in terms of building a repertoire, I play an instrument that doesn't have a huge canon for it. We're used to having to we play the Bach cello transcriptions, we play the violin partitas and sonatas. A lot of what we play is stolen. So I have a duo with piano, and we're just like shameless. Like we did the Beethoven cello sonata in A. She wants to do Debussy. That's going to be next. But the big project we're doing now is turning this giant orchestral and choral piece into a viola and piano duo. Mm-hmm. And it's because it's by a composer I really love, Sarah Kirkland Snyder. So it's just like, it's very time consuming. We're not even halfway done with it, and it's been months and months. And of course now quarantine has really put a damper on that, but I don't know if I've answered your question at all. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm just rambling.
That's great. And I want to ask, so when you're doing Brahms or Schubert or Beethoven or any of those classics or any of the newer music that you're talking about, here you have in front of you right now a good selection of our audience, our orchestral audience, or certainly people who love to listen to classical music that we like to perform. So what do you want your audience to get out of a performance of yours? What do you hope for them to go away with?
Wow. I guess I hope that I've taken them on a journey, that I try, if I'm either programming something with Elaine, the pianist that I play with, or with the quartet where we're all making the program together, that there's a sense of a internal coherence with the music that we're playing, and that they've maybe heard, if it's something we've played before, that they've heard it in a new way, and they hear why we're playing this again. You know, this piece that's maybe 200 years old. Why should we play it again? And what are we bringing to it? And I think the answer is the joy of, like, our joy in it, and that hopefully that's joyful for the audience as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, every concert that I conduct, I think is a journey. It's an adventure. There are highs and lows. There's the word flow is extremely important to me. That however you start the concert, it has to have some sort of flow from it. You can go below, you can go above, you can make a really wonderful emotional journey, however you start or however you end up. But somehow or other, for me, all the pieces need to somehow or other emotionally fit together. Maybe not in terms of their history or their style or anything like that, because I do like variety as well. Flow and variety are wonderful, wonderful terms that I like to follow. And it's great to be able to see how we can, I don't want to say manipulate, what's the right word, how we can entertain our audience by starting at a certain level and then going one way or another with it. That was a dog sneeze, right?
Yes, that was a dog.
Just checking to make sure.
Yep, you guys are gonna know his
So I came across an article in the New Yorker just April 13th, I think it was this year. And the article is entitled "How Music Can Bring Relief During These Anxious Times." And it wasn't specifically about COVID-19 so much as it was about somebody who had gone through a whole process of feeling lonely, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and how he happened to get out of it. The author's name is Donald Antrim. And I was so taken with this article, I copied down a couple of paragraphs that I'd like to share with all of you. He says, "I needed people's voices. I needed to see faces, to look into another's eyes, to hold someone's hand. The playwright William Congreve said, music has charms to soothe a savage breast, to soften rocks or bend a knotted oak. A savage breast is what we feel when we're alone too long. I sat on the sofa and listened to the music that had mattered to me when I was young. Steppenwolf, Pink Floyd, Black Sabbath. I put on then the music that I came to later in life, jazz, Bartok, Mozart, and Bach. The music seemed incrementally to soften, and as I fiddled with the sound system, it came to sound to feel more and more close. That's how I think of it now, listening as intimacy. My shoulders dropped, the muscles in my neck and face relaxed. I breathed more deeply. I prayed and I wept." I was just really touched by that article. That's not the entire article. So if you can find it online if you have any interest. So Amelia, how are you occupying your downtime these days?
Oh, wow. Well, I I find myself reading books. Sorry, that my dog definitely, speaking of anxiety, that's why I just muted. It seemed like it's not so happy. I read a book by Haruki Murakami and Seiji Ozawa. Have you read this book? It's called Absolutely on Music. That I found myself reading that, and then Evenings with the Orchestra by Hector Berlioz. It's like I'm missing ensemble playing, so I'm just reading about it. And I think the big thing right now is that a lot of us performers who are freelance, it's really tough to find that balance between playing and teaching. And right now, obviously the balance has been solved for us. So I'm teaching a lot, and I've started a group class with my private students. I'm teaching also in the public schools in Somerville. So it's been a lot of this with students playing, and it's been a huge challenge, but it's also, I find like it's really given me a lot of hope for like how, you keep hearing about how hard it is for kids to engage in the online learning. And I know myself with my kids, how hard this is. It's just not normal. It's not natural. And yet when they have instruments in their hands, it's just really different. So that's been a real discovery. And also just with this angle with the camera, like I always see my students' hands in different ways now. Like it's very intimate, like it's not like in a lesson they play with their hand right up in your face. There he goes. Or there's just all sorts of weird angles with the playing and the teaching. So that's been really interesting. And yeah, I'm just much more of a teacher now.
That's good. Yeah. I think as most people are, and certainly everybody's teaching online these days. That's for
right.
Sure. I even had to give conducting lessons the last few months of the conservatory online.
Wow.
That's a bit of a challenge to try and do that.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Picasso was quoted as saying, "The artist is a receptacle for emotions derived from anywhere, from the sky, from the earth, from a piece of paper, from a passing figure, even from a spider's web." And I would say that even we musicians are a receptacle from what happens sociologically as well. And we find that definitely in composers, but I think in terms of performers as well, we respond to what's happening societally. Which reminds me of that very famous quote of Leonard Bernstein, who said, "This will be our reply to violence." In his case, he said, "But this will be our reply to violence, to make music more intensely, more beautifully, and more devotedly than ever before." How do you respond to that?
Oh, wow. I think I used that as my sign off for all my farewell emails to the Somerville families. Was that quote, and then the other one about how music speaks to the unknowable or the ineffable. There's a great quote by Bernstein. And I have definitely found myself reaching for that. And I think I told you about this piece that my friend Maz wrote that was in response to Trayvon Martin, for the killing of Trayvon Martin, so years ago. And I'm revisiting that as a solo piece, and I'll be playing it. I have a very informal series of porch concerts here in Arlington, and I've played now the first 3 Bach suites, and I'll be doing the 4th next Thursday, along with this piece by Maz Swift, who I very much recommend, especially if you're curious about improvising on a string instrument. She is a master. And a composer. So I definitely feel like there's a revisiting of like of the canon. I know a lot of us are thinking about that, and who's represented in the concerts. But also with this isolation of the quarantine, there's like a real, wow, I can only play by myself now. I'm going to go really deep into these solo pieces and find solace there.
Good for you. That's great. So speaking of solo pieces, tell us about your viola. I know it has a very interesting story, and I'm sure we're dying to hear and perhaps even see it up close if possible.
Sure. This is my viola. I have these funky shoulder rests on it there. And it was made by Peter and Wendy Moos, or Moos and Moos. And I was looking for an instrument when I was a sophomore in college and had tried out, I don't even know how many, and I went to their house. Then they were in Stamford, Connecticut. And they didn't have a viola for sale, but they had the viola of Nobuko Imai, who is, among violists, a rock star, just a huge, huge celebrity among violists. And she was, I think she's still in Amsterdam. She had shipped it to them to work on it. So I got to play on her viola that they had made there. And I said, whatever is the next thing you're making, I'm taking. So they had a piece of wood that had just been started, and it was the back, and it took 9 months. So it was like having a baby. I got to go and visit them and see all the stages along the way, and the light box, and just all the different tools they have for getting the ribs curved, and their magical varnish that melted right there in the first month. That went away. That used to be the same color as the rest of the viola. But their varnish is famously soft, so it really freaked me out at first. I was like, the varnish is coming off. They're like, no, that happens to everybody. And
that's not a problem to have the varnish leave.
Not a problem, yeah. And it happens up on the scroll too, from where I tune it. So this is my forever viola. And the other thing is that I just about a year or two ago got my forever bow. So that's very exciting. I got it from Carriage House. And I don't know if you can see in the camera, but it has this really beautiful silver filigree in it. And what's nice about that is the bow maker is a man, but his wife did all the metal work. So it's also made by a couple. And I really like that they're both a team productions.
How do you know when you found the right bow?
Oh, wow. Well, I thought I had the right bow, and I was always struggling with the C string. And I went in for a rehair with my guy in New York, Greg Wiley, and I said, it's as light as a violin bow. I told him my whole story, and he started looking, he's like, oh, well, it is a violin bow. So the bow that I've been playing with this viola for 19 years, I discovered just a couple years ago was a violin bow. It's like, oh, that's why I have such a hard time getting the power out of my lowest string. So I started on a journey of just trying dozens of bows, and this is by Pierre-Yves Fuchs. He's a Swiss maker, and it just had the sound.
And now everything's perfect. You're perfectly in tune.
Oof.
Playing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's everything. Yeah. I wish. I feel like I'm still getting to know this bow, and that's the other thing with all this solo playing time is it's like I'm still learning. It's such a big transition. So.
Fantastic. Well, we'd love to hear you play. Do you have something lined up?
Oh yeah, I do. Here. So let's see if I can set this up. I have 2 short movements from. Whoa. My stand just tipped. Here, you know what? Sorry, this is 2 preludes from Lara Auerbach and her arrangement of the Shostakovich preludes, Opus 34. So there's 24 of them in all, 24 keys. And I'm going to play one in C sharp minor and one in G major. And these are just little amuse-bouche. They're just lovely little beautiful melodies. They're so fun to play. And this is an arrangement she made for viola and piano, but I figured these 2 are very much melodic the whole time. So does this look okay if I play right here? Does it, you guys?
Yeah, I think so. And we'll let you play both movements uninterrupted.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm just gonna. Woo.
Oh, fantastic. That was great. I just realized while you were playing, we forgot to get the canned applause for you.
Oh, I'll get my dog to sneeze. That'll be my,
Well, Amelia, it's been a real pleasure having you with us.
Thank you so much, Bruce, and it's nice to meet you all.
It's great to have you here. Thank you so much. Great performance, and we hope that you continue having a pleasant summer, as pleasant as can be. Get out there and do those porch concerts, I tell you.
They feed my soul.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's been great to see you all again. Have great summers yourself if we don't see you beforehand.